Hello and welcome to Sport Walk. Now, with all our focus here on ultramarathons, you could be forgiven for thinking that's all there is to sport walking. But in reality, that couldn't be further from the truth. So today, I want to walk you through all the different potential distances you could look to for your sport walking challenges. Okay, so let's start at the very bottom. And this is a distance range from 0 to 5 kilometers. And we call this the super sprint. Now you might be thinking 5 kilometers is absolutely nothing in comparison, say, to an ultramarathon. But don't be fooled. 5 kilometers can mean quite a lot. It all depends on the terrain you choose. Also, this shorter distance range is really good for a couple of other things. First of all, establishing what your actual pace potential is for longer distance challenges, and also using as a kind of a benchmark personal best measure. Now, if you're walking 5 kilometers on the flat, there's no argument that is a relatively straightforward and simple challenge. But of course, if you transfer 5 kilometers into, let's say, mountainous terrain, or even just hilly terrain, you're dealing with a whole different kettle of fish altogether. And that is where the super sprint really comes into its own. There are an awful lot of hills and small mountains, not just in the UK, but across Europe and the wider world, where you're going to reach the summit in less than 5 kilometers. So this test can be quite a strenuous one. If I were to challenge you to walk up your favourite mountain in the quickest time you can, you'd probably acknowledge that is quite a tough test. So you see, don't be fooled by just the distance alone. It's all a question of what you're packing into that 5 kilometers. Of course, there are other ways of doing a super sprint. You could treat it as an urban challenge or a city centre challenge, perhaps plotting a route that takes you around a whole different set of sightseeing options. In terms of the time it's going to take you to complete a super sprint test, a fast sport walker could complete 5 kilometers in under 40 minutes, whereas for the average fit sport walker, 50 minutes is an achievable target. But when you translate that super sprint test onto undulating, hilly or even mountainous terrain, that can have a big impact on your pace. My pace, for instance, drops from around 7 minutes 45 on the flat to around 11.5 minutes when I'm facing steep climbs. So as you can see, it's not all just about distance. You can make that 5 kilometer super sprint challenge a lot harder by increasing the severity of the terrain. Moving up a level then, and we come to what we call the sprint distance, and that includes anything from the 5 kilometer limit of the super sprint all the way up to around 15 kilometers. Now, just because it's called sprint distance doesn't mean you should be going at it full tilt. You really need to moderate your pace depending on the terrain and the actual distance you're covering. So for instance, if you're only going 6 kilometers, which is one more than the super sprint distance, then obviously you can afford to go a bit faster than if you're traveling for 15 kilometers. This distance range pretty well represents what any sport walker would do in their day-to-day, everyday training. If you're training for a particularly long challenge, you will obviously go further at the weekends, but it's quite common for a sport walking training program to include around 5 kilometers per day in the week and then 15 kilometers at the weekend. In terms of the kind of challenges you could take on at this distance, well, some good ones might include taking on a section of a national trail, or perhaps you could do a coastal route, maybe looping back inland and coming back to your start point. Either that or just doing an out and back along a stretch of the coast path. Another good sprint distance option is to include a number of peaks of hills or mountains within a given loop. The key with this, because it is a relatively short distance, is to really drill down and focus in on the value you're getting from that distance. So if you're going the full 15 kilometers, for instance, try and cram in as many points of interest, beautiful scenes as you can, and quite importantly, challenging elements. And if in particular you're doing a multi-hill loop, well then this is going to be a really great way of bedding in some solid hill work. and this will actually help you to progress if you approach it as a challenge, i.e. whatever route you're doing in whatever location and whatever the terrain, if you're only going 15 kilometers, make it count. Next, we're moving up to a distance range which is going to incorporate probably the vast majority of sport walking challenges that you do, and that's middle distance. In sport walking terms, middle distance offers huge potential, and within this distance range there are a number of milestone distances that you'll tick off along the way. The first time you walk 20 kilometers, for instance, feels like a really big achievement. Go a little bit further and do 21.09 kilometers and you've walked your first half marathon. Then moving up a bit further, 25 kilometers. Now that's half of a short ultra marathon. So as you can see, these milestone distances are really valuable. And that's one of the reasons why middle distance sport walking challenges are so good. Middle distance challenges can give you anything up to 5 or 6 hours of strong walking on trails. So that is a good day out in most people's books. And in terms of the pace you carry, it won't be that far off of what you might want to try and hold in an ultra marathon. So these distances are invaluable in terms of training yourself to settle into the right pace to go longer. The next and penultimate step is up to what we call marathon distance, and this ranges from 40 to 50 kilometers. Now, I do know that a marathon is 26.2 miles or 42.195 kilometers, so that is the precise distance of a marathon. But let's face it, if you end up walking 42, 43 or 44 kilometers, you're still just going to say, I've done a marathon, so it doesn't really matter. In terms of the kind of challenges you could take on, there isn't really anything new to suggest that we haven't already mentioned for the shorter distances. This is more about placing you in that pre-ultra phase and about going longer and learning a lot about yourself and actually achieving something that makes you think you could then step up to ultra distance. But while there may not be any particularly new ideas as to what you do, the time you want to be aiming for in a marathon challenge is worth noting. Because of the distance, time variations will be quite big, but a fast sport walker will be looking to complete a marathon in under 6 hours, whereas for somebody who's fit, strong, but not necessarily at that same level, anything from 6 to 8 hours is completely viable. And that brings us on to our last category, ultra distance. Now, while strictly speaking, anything over marathon distance is an ultra marathon. In the ultra running scene and in the sport walking scene, ultra marathons really start at 50 kilometers. But once you get into this ultra zone, there are a number of key distances which feature, especially in organised events. But really and truly, if you're setting your own challenge, you can pick a route that's as long as you want. For organised events then, where you get that medal and also the nice t-shirt to go with it, which of course you don't get if you set your own challenges, the 50 kilometre mark is probably the most widely available distance of all, and it really does offer a great introduction to ultra marathons. It's not a huge amount more than a marathon, so if you've already done a marathon, you don't have to moderate your pace that much or do an awful lot more training to be able to take on a 50k ultra after a marathon distance. The next level up from 50k is 80 kilometers, or roughly a double marathon. And this is where you start to get that real ultra marathon experience, because quite possibly you may go into the night a little bit, and you're certainly going to have to start learning how to refuel properly for longer distance challenges. After 80 kilometers, you get 100 kilometers, and this really does seem to be the benchmark ultra distance, at least at the moment. I think the appeal of the 100 kilometer mark, especially for event organisers, is that it gives them lots of options. People can either do 100 kilometers non-stop all the way through, they can split it into 2 over 2 days, but the organisers can also offer 2 opportunities to do 50 kilometers. Leaving aside the convenience for race organisers though, 100 kilometers really is a landmark distance in your personal development within sport walking. The sense of achievement that you get from completing that distance is unrivaled, and it'll only have you chomping at the bit to get back again next year and do it all over again. There is one other significant distance within the ultramarathon sphere, and that is the 100-mile mark. Now, this distance is the benchmark in high-level competition, and it's also one of those things, a little bit like Ironman in triathlon. Once you've achieved a certain amount in your sport walking development, that little temptation of the 100-miler, that ultimate test, can I actually achieve 100 miles? The temptation becomes too great. So there you are, all the potential distances you could take on as a sport walker. And I think you'll agree, it does give you an immense amount of scope for self-fulfillment and potential for a lifetime of exciting and fulfilling challenges. Now, it really doesn't matter what level you're at the moment. Don't be put off by these longer distances and what might seem like insurmountable challenges. If you just concentrate on what you're able to do, keep working at it, keep pushing yourself, keep testing yourself, but also aspire to go longer, aspire to do more, to progress, you will get there. If you want more information or advice on how you can progress so that you can go longer and take on longer challenges, then check out any one of our videos on the channel. There's lots of useful information on here, from how to walk more efficiently to how to climb hills. Or you could check out our website, sportwalk.net, where there's loads of useful articles and tips on how you can be a better sport walker. Or you might want to sign up to our online course, My First Ultra, if you're thinking about taking on your first ultramarathon. You can find a link to this from our website, sportwalk.net, where you can go straight to the sign-on page and get started. If you found this video useful, do give us a thumbs up, because we love receiving your feedback. And if you want to make a comment, pop it below and we'll get back to you as quickly as we can. But for now, enjoy your sport walking, and I'll see you next time.